Welcome to Yell, Fight, Sooie, college football from three friendly-ish rivals.
Welcome to week one of Yell, Fight, Sooie, where the Pacific is the Atlantic and the Atlantic is the Pacific. And we are here to talk all things Texas, Texas A&M, Arkansas football, as well as, well, all other football that's over the nation. We have storms in Arizona where dust is coming up and rain is blowing sideways, yet Arizona State somehow managed to fight on until 1 o'clock in the morning local time. Guys, the game finished at 3 a.m. in Central Time Zone last night. Jim Christopher is with us representing the Texas Longhorns. Jim, hello.
Hello, everyone. I'm wearing a shirt to help raise money for rehabilitating injured war dogs because I didn't realize it was College Colors Day.
Well, you know what? That's a better cause than college, and people should take out student loans and pay off. That's it. Take your student loan out, but don't pay it for books. Take it to help out wounded war dogs. Period. Andy, how's A&M? How are you? How's life?
I like dogs.
I like dags.
I like dogs. Dogs are good.
His dog is handsome.
Yeah, I don't want to get too it. I saw a horrible thing pop up on my Instagram feed about some 19-year-old dog that was left at a shelter, and it was a good story because somebody adopted him and he was living his best life for whatever he had left. But I just got really angry that somebody would put a 19-year-old dog in a shelter.
Fuck that guy.
Yeah, when you see it, man. Yeah,
I hope somebody leaves them in a shelter when they're 80.
I like dogs. I mean, that's what I was kind of hoping for. There's some karmic retribution, which is a lot of what college football is about. Karmic retribution, frankly.
Man, you could not have segued.
That's the best segue I've ever heard.
That is the best segue into the first topic I want to talk about.
Earning my paycheck.
Retribution. Well done. It's almost, I'm just going to take the day off. I don't have to host anything here because Andy's got my back. Jim, let's talk about Texas really quick. There was breaking news this morning. We will get to that in a moment. But since Andy set up this perfect segue, I can't fail. Big 12 commish, what's his name? Yarmark or whatever. I don't know if Yarmark from Ork or whatever. He was overheard telling Texas, the Texas Tech coach to take care of business against Texas this year at the end of the year, and basically send Texas off nice and good. Go take care of business. And after last year, with the way that Tech was throwing batteries and all these other fun things there at Texas, Jim, this one's got to get your blood boiling just a little bit.
It gets my blood boiling, but not as a Longhorn. It gets my blood boiling from a macro perspective of, you're supposed to be the commissioner of a league, and you're not really supposed to have you're not supposed to express those types of things. And now is all of a sudden, if Texas ends up in the college football playoff, he'll be all about Longhorns at that point. So for me, I think it's a really bad look. I understand where it comes from. It comes from fear. I've learned, Scott, especially dealing with filmmakers as much as I do, that most can you tell I just did announcements for who got into a festival yesterday? Yeah. Most most behavior like that comes from fear. And for as much as we think the Big 12 will be fine, they're going to lose a lot whenever UT leaves. And they've somehow been able to pitch UT as the villain in this situation, when it's my understanding that UT and Oklahoma have been asking the Big 12 to strengthen for ever since A&M left. And I think it's a bad look. I think it's a childish look, and I think it's very on brand for 2023.
Andy, this kind of feels like to me, like, okay, we've got, it's sort of, okay, I'm gonna make a 90s wrestling analogy here, but in an 80s wrestling type of territorial way. This feels like the two biggest guys in the territory, like your Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, have just left, okay? And you've tried to replace them by two good, yet not all that great tag teams, and told everybody, no, the product's still going to be great. Trust us. What are your thoughts here? I mean, BYU, Houston, Central Florida, this ain't Texas and Oklahoma. So is this just Big 12 getting a little butthurt?
My God, Scott. Is that Joey McGuire's theme music? Yeah, it's so last year, Texas Tech beat Texas. A field goal, flat closing minutes of the game, as I recall.
Close game.
And Joey McGuire as would be his experience up to that point, because he's a very successful high school football coach, went completely high school with the media, with his team, with his opponents. And it feels like if he embraces what the commissioner of the Big 12 wants him to do, and how he apparently wants him to act throughout this season, that's just a continuation of this kind of high school mentality that I think permeates the Big 12. And I don't want to sit here and say that, oh, well, SEC's this and all these other teams are less than. That's not what I'm saying. It's a certain mentality when you get to a level where there's should be a little bit of professionalism. There is nothing that Steve Sarkisian or Brent Venables or either of those two schools have done from a personnel standpoint to deserve, what I want to call unfair play. And that is what many of my friends who happen to be Longhorns are suspecting is going to happen, is the refs are going to call games a little bit tighter against them, that calls aren't going to go their way, that scheduling is not going to work out exactly they want, the air conditioning is not going to work in the locker room every weekend, that kind of stuff. And some of that is a mental game, but some of that is just high school. It's a high school mentality that I think really does permeate the schools of the Big 12, because historically, the ones that are going to be left in that group have been the have-nots. They are the Baylors of the world. They are the Kansas States of the world. Texas and OU did what they needed to do from a business perspective, because unfortunately, that's what drives college football in 2023 and 2024 and going forward. And if I'm Texas, I win that game and I give them no thought. If I'm OU, I win that game in Lubbock and I give them no thought. And that's really how it should be. The fact that you guys are living rent-free in Joey McGuire's head or Bill Yorchek's head, I don't even know what his actual name is humorous to me, because Texas Tech wouldn't have a football program if Texas hadn't decided to stay in the Big 12 10 years ago.
Yeah,
Ooh,
people forget that. Yeah, people
that is an excellent point. So
Jim,
Jim,
and I will say this to it kind of reminds me of Andy. It reminds me of Barry Switzer's opening press conference with the Cowboys, and it was very college. We're gonna win, baby. This whole bullshit. Like,
yep.
Like, what are you doing? So yeah, I think it's a great analogy, the high school thing. Scott, I'm sorry I cut you off.
No. What I wanted to ask you is how much play is this getting any play on local radio in Austin?
No, look,
that's why I'm shocked.
And I really want to remind everyone in the Big 12 that Texas sees itself as having two rivals, and none of those rivals are the other schools in the Big 12 other than OU. And I think that's also part of it. There has been a little brother syndrome, particularly out of Lubbock, forever. They want to be feared, or they want to see Texas get an itch in their pants to beat them, just like we did when A&M was in the conference and like we do with OU. And they've tried, and honestly, the conference has tried to force that by, for a while, making them the Thanksgiving game and hoping they could force that kind of emotion. But that emotion's built over time, and it's built over being competitive. And for the lion's share of its run against Texas, like, what does Texas Tech beat Texas like 8 times or something? It's something stupidly low. But so for me, no, I mean, no one's actually talking about it until you brought it up. I had to go Google it.
Wow. Okay. Well, on that part, I guess that's good news. I will say this, Andy, if and watch this segue. Watch what I do here. I'm calling it out before it happens. So if we do look at this, though, in the Big 12 landscape, you've got the 2 biggest players on the block leaving. Maybe this is a situation where they look at Texas Tech like this is going to be a leader of our conference. If so, that doesn't say a lot about your conference, because that's not a school you should stake your claim to. But other conferences are growing rapidly. The ACC just today officially sends out the deal for SMU, Cal, and Stanford.
Why not?
Just let me make sure. The Atlantic Coast Conference has invited SMU, which hasn't seen an ocean since it was founded, and Cal and
an ocean of cocaine, maybe
an ocean of cocaine and Trans Ams and a whole lot of oil money in the 80s. But Cal and
Hey,
Stanford.
hey.
So I'm just saying, there was a lot. Sorry, Eric Dickerson still not returning that gold Trans Am, Andy. But
I'd rather have the story at this point, frankly.
Honestly,
what's
yeah.
going on here? Is this more? Is this more about just we got to make ourselves big. We got to get big, even if it wrecks us.
No, sorry, Andy, you had the answer first. My bad.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and as an aside, we probably need to set aside one of these episodes to talk about renaming these conferences.
Because we can't do math and we don't know geography.
Math is not good, and now geography is off the map. American education at its finest, folks. I propose the All Coast Conference. That would make a whole lot more sense, but that's not here or there. So
That offends me because I'm in the flyover where there is no coast. Sorry.
Well, I mean, so is SMU for that matter. Cal and Stanford got a big player behind them as far as ACC politics goes when Notre Dame said it would be a good idea if you extended an invite to those two schools. We would like that. And so
particularly Stanford, because they're a rival.
And Cal is occasionally on Notre Dame's schedule. SMU is the one that's kind of the head scratcher to me, but you've got to get to 18 teams if you're going to form a league. But I think the big deal here is not necessarily geography. Again, for football, it doesn't really matter. It's a once a week travel that you might do once every other year if they set up the schedule the way I kind of assume they're going to, where 1 year you go to Stanford, 1 year you go to Cal for the teams that play them, and that's it. But it's just it's the state of college football in 2023. It's people grabbing to not be perceived as less than. And it tells you a lot about where Cal and Stanford and SMU especially were. If the terms that were rumored last week are going, those schools are taking, I think, half distributions for a number of years, and SMU is taking no distribution for 7 years to make the move into the ACC, because even the ACC's crappy television deal is better than what they have currently,
or what they could have,
or what they will have in 2024, because the Pac-12 is not going to exist. So there's that much money rolling around that makes these things, I guess, make sense on paper. But anybody with common sense can look at a map and go, I'm Wake Forest. I have a limited budget. Nobody watches my games anyway. I now have the expense of sending my volleyball team to Palo Alto at least once a year. I've got to send my basketball team there. I've got to send my tennis team, my baseball team, my, Quidditch team, whatever they play. I don't know what they play at Wake Forest.
Well, I know at Stanford they play
everything.
It excites me to think about Stanford playing baseball and basketball in the ACC. I mean, just because of their teams and how that will match up. But good Lord, the travel is ridiculous. Jim, what are they thinking here?
Well, the one thing that strikes me as Andy was answering was how lately the Big Ten and SEC have done nothing. And it's interesting that it's quality over quantity, or quantity over quality. And it's almost like, I think if they just grab as many schools as possible, it somehow equates having some of the best programs in college football in your conference. And, I'm worried about the Olympic sports surviving at this point. I'm worried about our universities just going to become football schools, and then I guess volleyball, because Title IX says you have to be equal. But I'm worried about what's going to happen with some of these other sports that frankly already don't make money, and in a lot of cases lose money just by existing. And now you've tripled that expense. It's not a good look at all.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Jim, Greg Sankey, who's the SEC commissioner, has more or less said that they're not in any hurry to add teams and don't know if they need to. And frankly, I would agree with that from an SEC standpoint, because if they need to get to 20, which seems to be the new magic number right now, it could go up to 24. Who knows what it's going to be in 5 years, but they're going to be really selective. And those teams are going to come from the ACC territory. There's nothing going the other way that really interests anybody. Notre Dame might be the one outlier to what I'm talking about. And they're, technically up for grabs, but they're a member of the ACC, kind of. But you're going to look at wanting to have a Carolina school, a North Carolina school, a Virginia school, and maybe a couple of schools in existing geography states. But until that happens, there's not a big push for that.
Yeah.
I've got to think that the Big 10, 12, Big 100, whatever they are, the big is, again, we need a renaming show. They've got to be standing pat right now too, because there's just not a lot of properties that are worth anything, but they would be as interested as the SEC will be in a University of North Carolina, in Virginia. And I think it'll be interesting how that unfolds, because if Florida State, Clemson, and a couple of others continue their noise, like we talked about last week, the ACC, even with adding these 3 teams, isn't going to last under the current television contract. Notre Dame could be the player that moves that needle, though.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because, in the Big Ten sort of has an identity of, for the most part, being big state schools, and how many of those big state schools are really left, particularly in the footprint that they have. Because I don't imagine any of the big state schools that are in the SEC are going to leave. There's that would be dumb. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where they go, because I think you're right. I think if the Big Ten expands at all, they're going to keep going east. They're not going west. There's nothing out there that matters to them, I don't think.
I think from a recruiting standpoint, also, it's going to be very interesting, because in the past, the SEC has sold schools on, hey, you get to see, your mom and daddy's going to get to see you all over the nation. And now it's more of a thing. Well, if you play in our conference, your mom and daddy will be a day drive away from any other school, but every other conference, they won't be. So it's almost like this recruiting tool that comes back the other way. But speaking of recruiting, or kind of like recruiting, let's switch over to A&M now and take a look at things there, Andy. So it's not so much recruiting, but in the offseason, you've had some changes. There were stories that, there's no way that Jimbo and Bobby are going to get along well. I've been of the mindset that Bobby Petrino knows when to get in line. It's kind of looked like maybe he has, but the one A&M story that everybody is eager to see are how well Jimbo Fisher and Bobby Petrino are going to get along on the sidelines. There have been mixed reviews, but they say everything is great. Andy, what do you think?
It's great till it's not, right? So I don't know what Saturday proves to you. I don't think, beating whatever New Mexico wrong way state that we're going to be playing by 35 to 50 points is going to make a big difference. I don't think there's a fight there to be had. Everybody is saying the right things. I think it's a fairly tired take that these are 2 grumpy old men and they're not going to be able to coexist. Although I will say Grumpy Old Men was a delightful movie, and I would be happy to watch it again. Maybe on the sidelines.
I'm not sure I've seen it, but okay.
Grumpy Old Men's fantastic.
Okay, I'll watch. I'll download it for the plane tomorrow.
Walter Matthau, chef's kiss. Anyway, rubber's going to meet the road when you start playing the Arkansas, the Alabamas, and later on the LSUs of the world. And it's going to work if they win games, and it's not going to work if they don't win games. I think Petrino's saying the right things, that Jimbo's the boss. And what I've heard from practice reports is that Jimbo is not running the offense. He is not coaching the quarterbacks. He is moving from position to position during practice sessions and not focusing on the offense. So he has spent time with the cornerbacks, with the defensive line, with the linebackers, with special teams, and not been in Petrino's ear about this guy needs to play, this guy needs to run this route, we need this blocking scheme. So if that's the case, I think it's a happy marriage, but it's only a happy marriage for anybody, even if they don't fight publicly, even if they never fight privately. It's only a happy marriage if they win games. And by win games, I mean at least 9. And that's a tall order for a team that was 5-7 last year. So that's where the controversy is for me, is not do you have the right players, but is the whole thing the right mix to make this work? Because we're in year 6 of Jimbo. There is no recruiting on hope anymore. There is no more excuses about leadership or injury, because the entire team is your kids. So you've got to win now. I don't really care how the sausage is made.
Yeah, the good news is this marriage doesn't have to last 50 years. I think if it lasts 5 years, A&M fans would be happy. Jim, what are your thoughts here? Grumpy old man out on the football field.
The Grumpy Old Men's going to be the new name of this show at some point. No, I look, I mean, I completely agree with him. And I only agree with him because I don't know the internal politics of A&M, but I know every single time this situation happens, how many times did Mac Brown have to change coaches after the whole Greg Davis left? How many times do we see this? We're seeing this with the Dallas Cowboys right now in the NFL. This is what you say. You don't say anything else. You don't say, well, it's not as good as my first wife, but I'm hoping things work out. You don't say that. So this is going to be what it's going to be until we hear about it. And I'm always questioning, and Andy can answer this. I don't know if was Jimbo, I'm guessing, was sort of forced to hire someone new. Like, I'm sort of gently, at least gently persuaded to.
I'm going to take everything at face value. So according to what Jimbo has said, and according to what the AD has said, and also our chief booster, Jimbo presented this idea that he realized last year, not necessarily because of wins and losses, just this landscape of college football as a head coach has changed. Recruiting is the lifeblood of college football. That's more so true than ever. But you're also recruiting.
But it's not that different than when he was at. Come on, I mean, it hasn't changed.
But you're also recruiting your entire roster every season.
Okay,
and
that's
sometimes
true.
Game to game. You've got these literally.
It's so true.
Literally, you have to. A&M didn't put out a depth chart this week, and they're not going to put out a depth chart this season. Alabama didn't put out a depth chart. And the reason for that is because you don't want to have to explain to some kid that could transfer why he's not the starter on paper.
That's a very common thing. Arkansas is doing this.
But that's where
Texas. I mean, Texas is doing the same thing. The only thing yeah.
And so the things that, to put it in Texas parlance, that Mac Brown used to get. Mac Davis is a great singer, but Mac Brown used to get in trouble for or be criticized for as being the CEO coach. That's what you have to have now. The X's and O's guy isn't where the premium is. You need a guy who can run a multi-billion-dollar program.
Sure.
And all aspects of that. And if that's what Jimbo is willing to slide into and be successful at, because he is a very good recruiter. You can see that by the fact that we're 5-7 and we're number 7 in the national rankings right now with only 20 players. That's he's doing a good job in recruiting now that he's paying attention to it again, kind of full-time-ish. But it's going again, you've got to win games, and that's the bottom line at this point.
Yeah, I mean, again, I agree. We're gonna know if this is really BS or not if they start losing. So
yeah, Stone Cold said so.
It's a good storyline, and it's the storyline that has to come out of College Station right now because it's the unknown until a few games happen. But I'm with you. I think these guys they both were assistant coaches. They both were prominent assistant coaches in their past. They know how to get in line and what a hierarchy looks like. I think I do think it's a recipe for success, but we'll see.
And I just think going back to those narratives, though, like, remember when Mac hired Brian Harsin? Oh, look at that! Now he's going to get young and innovative, and so we're always going to hear some version of that story. Mac Brown decided he needed to be younger and hipper, like.
But how many Texas fans would, after Greg Davis was gone for a couple of years, would have loved to have Greg Davis back?
Oh, I mean,
you were consistently putting up 40, 50 points a game.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to be happy, guys, because on the Arkansas front, there's really no story to talk about right now, and that's great because usually at this time of year we've done something. Yeah, the biggest thing, and I just want Tusk is the Arkansas mascot that comes at games. The guy who's his handler unexpectedly died within the last couple of weeks. So thoughts go out to that family, but here comes Tusk. That is the only Arkansas big news. Everything else going into the season, things are hopeful for Arkansas. So I thought we might have a little bit of fun here. Let's take a look. So I want Jim and Andy to tell me what Arkansas season is going to be like. And then Andy and I are going to tell Jim what it's like. And then Jim and I are going to tell Andy what it's like. So guys, predict my season for me. Whoever wants to start, what's it going to look like?
I think you guys are going to be 8-4. I think it's going to be a good, solid season. I think having an 18-year veteran at quarterback is going to help. So, yeah, I think in the SEC West, that's a good record, 8-4.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm exactly at the same record. It's really interesting how crappy the schedule maker treated you guys this year because Western Carolina, Kent State, BYU, you should win all 4 of your non-conference games. But those 3 are a nice setup, but it's a progression in playing better teams, just a little bit better every week.
Yep.
BYU is a good test, but you're at home. But then this September 23rd to October 14th stretch, good Lord, what did y'all do?
It's the SEC.
Piss
It's every
off.
year. It's every year.
At LSU, neutral game against Texas A&M, at Ole Miss, out at Alabama.
Yeah.
That's
every other year. That's what we get every other year.
That's a rough stretch. Once you get out of that, the rest of these games are very winnable, and you should be favored in them, I would guess. So I'm at 7-1 outside of those 4 games. My 8-4 comes. I think that stretch is tough, and it's a 1-3 stretch, and it'll be a big job on the coaching staff to keep the team focused if they do go 1-3 in that stretch, to come back and win out, which I think they're fully capable of, because Mississippi State should be down. Florida looked like hot garbage on a plate last night. Defense looked okay. Offense reminded me a lot of A&M last year.
It looked like Florida from like 10 years ago when they could score 9 points a game, but you couldn't get more than 15 off of them.
Auburn, I don't know what's going to happen there. Florida International, obviously, and then Missouri closing out your season. It sets up, I think, pretty well for a close. It's just how that middle's going to go. That's a rough stretch.
Yeah, it's going to be a really roller coaster season for Arkansas. Exactly what you guys are talking about, and I do think, I'd said last week I think we get to 9 wins, but it's much of that same philosophy. I think we will be at 4-3, and then win our last 5. I mean, just like what you're talking about, Andy, which means that Arkansas social media should be very interesting, because people will be having meltdowns. Oh God, we won our first 3 games and then we lost 3, right? Because welcome to the SEC,
Right.
So, but if I look at the other, well, I take it back. We're going to the Big 12 next. With Jim. Andy, what are your thoughts on the Longhorn season? You already mentioned it's their swan song. Are the games going to be called tighter? How's Texas going to look at the end of this year?
Well, I mean, Texas has left 2 conferences and come into 2 conferences. They've won the championship in all of those situations, and I don't really see anything different because the schedule. Texas out-talents everybody in that conference. 1, I think that Sark is at some point going to have to win more than 8 games in a season, and it might as well be this one. I mean, it might as well. It's going to happen at some point, and it's kind of like our Dusty Baker conversation. If you keep giving him better talent, he makes fewer mistakes. So maybe this is the year that Sark puts that together. But the Big 12 is down. That's not why Texas is going to win, but it's certainly going to help.
Mm-hmm.
But again, looking at the schedule, how it sets up, I think if I'm looking at losses, I think going into Bryant-Denny is a tough schedule, no matter how improved you guys are.
Yeah, definitely.
How Quinn Ewers is improved. Alabama is a different animal at home than they are on the road.
100%.
And they're also, I would assume, have circled this matchup because you kind of embarrassed them last year, even though they left DKR, Texas Memorial, Royal Field Stadium, Earl Campbell, Doak Walker, Taco Bell. I don't remember all the names. There's a lot, but
there's a lot.
Texas played well. You're going to beat Rice. You're going to beat Wyoming. You're going to beat Baylor, Kansas. I see you beating Oklahoma. My one other trip up, because I have you at 10-2, is this weird U of H game 2 weeks after Oklahoma.
Oh, weird. Okay.
It's in Houston. It's very likely that the Cougars will have stadium, stands that collapse again, because famously, I think, what was his name? Bill Dodds? No, the AD that I don't like, whose name DeLoss Dodds. There you go. No, DeLoss Dodds. Very famously, the last time Texas went to play Houston at U of H, we will never play in this stadium again. We will never travel to this city again to play this school, because it was a high school stadium. Guess what? It's a nicer high school stadium still. But Sark very famously will trip up somewhere in the year and lose a game that he's not supposed to lose. That one, to me, and U of H has all the red ass about, wanting to fit in and wanting to be the guys, and that one's tough. Once you get past that, I think you beat BYU handily. Kansas State's not going to be as good. TCU, I guess we'll find out tomorrow how far they've fallen. I would suspect a lot. Even though they'll probably beat Colorado. I don't understand the hype around Colorado. I understand the hype around Colorado. I don't understand how anybody picks them to win more than 5 games.
Yeah. Because Deion's not playing corner.
And then evidently you are Texas Tech's homecoming game, which is weird because it's in Austin.
I think you hit the nail on the head with Houston and what Texas is going to find whenever they go up. Also, I think with Houston, their starting quarterback is the transfer in from Texas Tech, so that's going to add in a little bit of drama and noise around that one too. You have them at 10 wins, is that correct, Andy?
10-2, but winning the conference.
I think your logic and my logic are sound. I do see the Houston game as being difficult. I think Alabama is Alabama in Alabama. That's always going to be hard, but I think Texas really possesses the ability to beat them because I don't think Alabama has all the answers they want on offense just yet.
Yeah.
I
think also beating Alabama at home, you have to throw down the field. You can't dink and dunk to the sidelines because they're too fast vertically or horizontally. If Ewers can throw down the field successfully, you'll beat Alabama, but that's a taller order in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, that's easy to write down on paper, and then you have to execute it. I also think that the last season through the Big 12, in as much noise as this is going to be, I think the worst that Texas finishes is 9-3. Okay, I think that 11-1 is a possibility. And honestly, if you get past I think if you get past Alabama, the possibility of 12-0 obviously exists, but the target becomes so huge on your back.
Yeah.
That I don't know if you can escape every week being, if right now this year, Texas knows that on their opponent's schedule, they are circled every week. The target is on Texas' back.
And while it always is that way, it's that way more.
Oh, amplified like crazy this year. Oklahoma will not feel the same thing. And if Oklahoma had 3 years where they're getting better, maybe people would feel. But Oklahoma's heading the wrong direction. Texas is heading the right direction as they leave the Big 12. Now let's talk about the other guy, Jim. Let's talk about this other guy.
I've got A&M. I got A&M at 9-3. What I wanted to do was jokingly put them at 8-3-1 and put you at 7-4-1. So that way we could say that y'all would tie. So I don't have to pick favorites. So I don't want to pick favorites. But no, I mean, I think, look, I see losses for I see a loss against Alabama. I see a loss against LSU, and I see a loss against Tennessee, and that's really it. I think, I think 9-3, and I do think, like you mentioned on the show last week, Andy, that if it's like 8-4 has to be. I don't know if you said 8-4 is the bottom, or you can't be 8-4, but I think they should feel really good about 9 wins.
I remember the 8-4 comments too. Is that like the over/under line? What you're thinking, Andy? Or
no? For me, 8-4 is where you have to start explaining the 4. 9-3 is going to save Jimbo's job because they have to. I think they have to finish this season with 10 wins. If that 10th win comes in a bowl game, I'm okay with that.
Sure.
It's where did those losses come from?
Yeah.
Did you lose to both Mississippi schools, but somehow managed to beat Alabama? That's very Jimbo.
Yeah, there's a story to be told there. I honestly, I think that I think you go 8-4. So I have A&M at 8-4. Obviously, I have a very quiet confidence about Arkansas, so I have that game going differently than you guys do. So, well, Jim got his part in though, at least. So, Andy, I can say that I think 8-4 just because you have some questions around the offense at the quarterback position specifically, and like you said, it's a gauntlet. The SEC is always a gauntlet, but this is going to be a huge year before Texas comes in with the added pressure that Jimbo feels this year from what they didn't feel last year. I could see you getting to 10 wins in the regular season, but 8-4 is where I think you're going to land.
I mean, I don't think that's wrong. I think there's a couple of big swing games in here that I think we have a very good chance of being 5-1 going into Alabama.
Yeah.
I mean, you even could make an argument that 4-1 or 5-0. That depends how Arkansas goes. I think Arkansas is a swing game for us. I think Alabama and Tennessee are what they are. I'm not convinced Tennessee is going to be as good as they were last year because I think a lot of that was the offense, and they showed after Hendon Hooker went out last year, not quite as good offensively without him. But that puts a big target on playing South Carolina 2 weeks after that. And of course, Spencer Rattler's the quarterback, and we haven't mentioned him yet this year. So, check that box.
We've gone this long without even saying the word Spencer Rattler. It's just.
But I will also tell you the game that's going to get under most A&M fans' the burr under the saddle is Lane Kiffin in Oxford at Ole Miss. That kid just keeps running his mouth, and I think we're about the same age, so I can call him kid. He just runs his mouth nonstop, and he has put a target on his back, and he keeps beating A&M. He keeps beating Jimbo. That is one that's a season salvager if you go there and beat him handily.
Yeah. Yeah.
Season salvager.
I think
at the same time, you go beat Ole Miss and you beat Mississippi State, you exercise some of the ghosts that Jimbo has had so far in his career here. You set up real nicely to, go into LSU possibly for the division. So there's a lot of ifs in there. It's really going to be, to me, how many points can this team score on a consistent basis and look good doing it?
Yeah, it's if you think about just the coaching talent in the SEC, sometimes that becomes really the Lane Kiffins, the Jimbo Fishers, the Bobby Petrinos, who's an assistant for crying out loud. Brent Venables
Hugh Freeze is back.
Hugh Freeze has come back, and hopefully he's figured out what a burner phone is this time around. Or here's an idea:
just use WhatsApp.
Yeah, or just don't call hookers. There's a thought too. Just don't call.
That's why you have assistants.
Yeah. That the burner phones and assistants are. This is for a reason, Hugh Freeze. But if you think about just the talent level in the SEC, the average coach in the SEC is usually a well-known name outside of this just this region. I mean, you're going up against the best of the best every week. I know people get tired of hearing that, and people outside the SEC think we're all just jerking each other off when we say that over here, but the record shows, I mean, this is absolutely the toughest conference for a reason.
Yep. Well, I mean, the NFL validates that because year after year after year, the most draft picks are taken.
Exactly. What's the first pick of the draft? Yep.
Well, what that means, though, the gauntlet that you keep talking about, you're playing against draft picks every week. I'm not picking on Kansas, but I'll pick on Kansas. They might have one guy on their squad, maybe two in a good year, that get drafted as a high pick.
Yeah.
But you can avoid one guy on a football field. When you are playing Alabama, when you are playing LSU, when you are playing Auburn, when you're playing Arkansas, you've got guys on both those lines that are going to have NFL careers, and they're big and mean and physical. And when they get tired, they just put in more guys that are just like them.
They put in the kid that's one or two classes right below them that has the exact same talent level.
Right.
Be in that guy's shoes in a year or two. It is very common. Well, since we've lost Jim, we have a little bit of time, but Andy, is there anything you want to talk about? If not, we're going to wrap this up, but I'm going to give you the possibility for the last word.
I did break my cherry, I guess last night, and watched college football for the first time because I could not stomach any of the games that were on the schedule during week 0 because there were some dogs. Florida looked bad. Arizona State, I guess, looked good, but it took them 18 hours to play the football game.
The weather was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Seriously, a storm in Arizona, a Dust Bowl storm. I mean,
well, that's just normal, and we've only recorded history for the last 150 years, so you can't say that it's climate change, Scott. So don't even go there because
no, I never.
We had a hurricane in California this year, and wildfires and nothing else, nothing out of the ordinary is happening. We always schedule around these things. That will actually be fun for me if we can get off this game against New Mexico Saturday without having a 4-hour lightning delay. That'd be great because that'd be the first time in a while that we've been able to do that.
Arkansas moved the scheduled kickoff time for Western Carolina. First of all, they're playing in War Memorial Stadium, which is in Little Rock, which is the stadium that Mike Leach said was the loudest he had ever been in. It only seats about 60,000 people, but it was built in 1947. It is made out of nothing but metal and concrete. It reverbs like nothing else you've ever heard before in that little place. But they moved it from 3 p.m. to noon because parking at War Memorial Stadium happens on the former War Memorial Golf Course, which they shut down a couple of years ago and use it as a parking lot for Razorback games now. That's brilliant. Well done with the tax dollars there, Little Rock, for that one game a year that you might get. But they moved it up to noon because they were concerned that that if they kept it at 3, people were going to melt and wilt during the heat, as were the players. If they moved it to a night game, not only would players not get back to Fayetteville until after 1 o'clock in the morning, but the people drinking on the golf course since 10 a.m. would be passing out from heat exhaustion. So they moved the game up to noon.
I mean, we're excited here in Texas that the high is only going to be 100. That's only. It's not 105, 110 like it's been for the last couple of weeks.
Well, it is going to be warm on Saturday. Jim has returned in body, if not in spirit. Hello.
Hi. Yeah, we're back.
We're just talking about hot football games this weekend.
I have a question for both of you.
Yep.
What I think we all three expect to win, and winning's, kind of the bottom line this opening weekend. What would you have to see that would concern you in these opening games about your teams? Because I can answer mine. Mine is if we score 35 points and it feels like a struggle, it feels like you're pulling wisdom teeth to score those points against New Mexico. That would be a concern of mine.
Jim?
No, I think they have to be handled. To bring Mac Brown up again, I was there in 2010 when Texas played Rice and only won by 15, I think. And that was the writing on the wall of Mac Brown's panic season that led to Texas only winning, I think, 8 games or something. So
was not a real neat deal.
Not a neat deal.
Not a neat deal. For Arkansas on the offensive. So with new offensive and defensive coordinators, I want to see how they click. For defensively, if you're torched deep, if you can't stop a deep ball against a team like Western Carolina, then that's going to show me that there's pores on the defensive side. So I want to see pressure on the quarterback and no long passes from a defensive side. On the offensive side, I want to see timing and that things click. I just want to see things clicking because they've had 4 weeks plus to work on it at this point. Results, we should all win. We should all, if any of us
don't win, then we might as well cancel the show.
Yeah, I will be on suicide.
Hey, we didn't cancel it after App State last year.
True.
Right. None of us are playing App State this week, so we don't have to worry about that. And that's going to be our segue to get out of here, guys. We thank you very much. Look, we are 1.5 weeks into the college football season. We've got so many stories. We had a couple of things we didn't even get around to. Deion Sanders is running his mouth. The post Pat Fitzgerald era at Northwestern starts. There's a lot of good football stories going on this week. I hope you're able to tune in. I also want to mention to Spectrum and Disney, please fix your crap so I can actually watch a game right now. That's on a broadcast ESPN station. That would be really cool. That would be neat. And on that, for Jim Christopher, for Andy Tom Chesson, I am Scott McIntyre. This was Yell Fight Sooie. We'll see you next week. Enjoy.